The best interviews about creativity are not really about creativity. They're about obsession. They're about hunger and rebellion and identity and seeing the world differently. In this week's podcast, I talk with Charles Nix. Charles is the son of a printer. I love saying that. Son of a printer. That's my new expression. Son of a printer. He's a son of a printer, a designer, typographer, and educator with a lifelong passion for type. Charles taught typography for over 2 decades as the chair of communication design at Parsons and is currently the senior executive creative director for Monotype. Charles and I share a lot of history, and it was a joy to reminisce and also to think about the future with Charles. So I present to you 2 type nerds talking about what they love. Son of a printer. Here we go. Charles Nix, so great to catch up with you.
It is my pleasure, James. You know,
I'm glad we bumped into each other at that South by Southwest dinner, which was very fancy, by the way.
it was super fancy, and the level of conversation always makes me feel way out of my depth. I mean,
yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, I love being the dumbest person in the room.
Yeah, well, that's the room.
Charles, I'm gonna begin like I begin every interview. And I think I know part of the answer. What made you weird as a kid?
What made me weird as a kid? Do you want the real answer, or I'll give you a real answer, but probably not the deeper answer. The thing that made me weirdest as a kid is that we had a printing press in my basement, like a real printing press, like an offset lithograph machine that my father, when he would come home from work, would begin manning a second press. So he worked as a pressman all day long and then come home and work as a pressman in the evening, doing stuff for like local block club organizations and the local churches. And so we had printing around us and the smell of ink in our house from my earliest memories.
Awesome. Excellent. What's the other part of that answer?
The other part of that answer is that
because that's an outside source.
I grew up in a large Catholic family in Akron, Ohio, and there were 6 of us, so sort of very Brady Bunch. And we didn't have, they weren't 3 from 2 separate marriages, but yeah, my oldest sister Peggy and my older sister Molly are the 3 of us made up the olds, and the youngers were Jenny, Freddie, and Michael, and they still are. Molly is developmentally disabled, so from a very early age, that was a big part of my sort of formative experience of the world, and it's a big part of my worldview, of how we are here not just for ourselves and just sort of like claw at the top, but to sort of keep everyone who is not able to fend for themselves front of mind. What
a beautiful answer.
That's the truth.
I knew about the printing press that your dad had. That's freaking fantastic. And obviously informs a lot of your love of printing and design and typography. We share a lot of history, kind of a similar upbringing. The New York scene and graphic designers, very similar, very close generationally. Doing work. I think just before computers came in the scene.
I've been thinking about that a lot lately as we sort of confront this sort of agentic design wave that's about to crash on the shore here. That there are so many parallels and so many sort of unknowns, but so many sort of parallels with the way that that transition from mechanicals to digital took place in our lives. Like it was, we I think you and I were both well formed enough as designers that we had done mechanicals boards and sort of lived at that pace of design.
Hmm.
And then suddenly, being the age that we were when it arrived, it was so easy to adapt because people in their early 20s adapt really well to things. Like it's just the realities of the work are not so fixed. The sort of realities of the craft are not so sort of deeply ingrained that you can't adjust to a new reality right away. I think at this stage in my life, if I was confronted with the same thing, I might be a little more sort of hesitant about it, but I took to it like a duck to water.
I often think about that period in my own life, and what I think about is how blessed I was to have learned all the crafts and skills. If I needed a dingbat, I made a dingbat. If I needed a particular typeface, I made a particular typeface. And I was kind of reared in a design studio. I don't know if you ever knew of this character, Paul Bacon, who was a book jacket designer. And his work, he did all of Joseph Heller's work, all of James Clavell's work, all of Robert Ludlum's stuff that became all the Born Identity series. Um, um, you go to an antique bookstore and it's just like full of, Paul Bacon's work. He did Jaws that became the movie poster and Cuckoo's Nest that became the movie poster. And
Wow.
um, a real genius. He could paint like God in like small gouache watercolors. And he was a hand lettering expert. Like there was nothing he couldn't do. So I love that I grew up in that place. Um, and then of course, I try to carry those skills on, today. Um, so I think you and I both have a certain relish for that ability, and I think that stuff helps us today, even.
Definitely.
Um, so I think both of us were basically born to do what we love.
Yes. Blessed.
Um, you know, were there besides it being kind of bred in the family, were want to do for a living early on?
When despite the fact that as Ellen Lupton said, I was born with a silver typographic spoon in my mouth. And it's no joke that UNLC was on the coffee table when I was in grade school. Like it's true, all that stuff was around there. But my Aunt Claudia, who I admired so much because she was so talented as an artist, um, was more of the sort of traditional like draw and paint kind of artist. And my formative influences in high school weren't necessarily around graphic design, but more about art and drawing. So drawing and painting, a little bit of sculpture. Um, there was a constant sort of pull because I had the ability to make letter forms and to sort of sign paint and stuff like that as a youngster. But when I left home and from Akron at age 17 to go to New York, um, I was bound and determined to go study painting and drawing at Cooper Union.
Mhm.
But my first job as a work study student was in the Center for Design and Typography. So, I mean, the more I sort of ran away from it, the more it sort of pulled me back in. And the allure of letters was, it was there from when I was a little kid. Um, mostly from my mom's handwriting, but from, obviously from UNLC magazine, inland printer, and sort of the press type that was all over the house. So yeah, you can run from those things, but ultimately, once I found out that there were people who were typographers as professionals, the die was cast. I was like, okay, I could do that. That's a thing. Like I didn't realize that people actually did that. So I was so excited when I met William Bevington and George Sadek at Cooper Union and James Craig too. They really showed me that this was something that adults did, that wasn't just sort of like some sort of weird arrival from some sort of weird craft corner of the universe, that these were practicing professionals who did typography at a high level as adults. That was their career. And it made me super excited and like I found my place.
Oftentimes, us as creatives early on, we are, there's a lot of slapping our wrists, a lot of, being too much, being too loud, being too boisterous, being too, just too much. I got a lot of that when I was a kid. Were you the kind of kid who, did your obsession or creativity ever cross that border?
I think I was more in the environment that I grew up in. I was more like the sort of the odd bird in the nest. And so they sort of, in retrospect, took care of me and sort of carved a path around me, rather than sort of chastising me for what I really love to do. So one of my it's so indicative when you think of it later. It's just so ridiculous at the time. It just seemed part of the fabric of my life, as these things are. But in 7th grade, the school teacher, Mr. Becker, it's my 7th grade teacher, said, you're better at this than I am, so why don't you just teach art class? And so I did this graphic reduction project with the students in my 7th grade class. So it was taking a photograph, reducing it to black and white form, and then using a typewriter to make ASCII art of the high contrast image. So talk about hilarious. Like, I had come up with the project on my own. It was just something that I did in my spare time. But I was like, sure, I think I can use this for them. They're not going to be able to paint a bird or something. Like, I might have them do something that's more in my wheelhouse. So yeah. So that's the kind of sort of rather than them sort of saying, would you stop drawing on everything, and stop drawing on your classmates' notebooks, stop drawing on everyone's book covers. They said, there's got to be some way we can channel this for this child. And I was always a good enough student that they didn't really worry about my grades or my academics, but never sort of ambitious enough in my academics that they were going to pluck me out and put me into Harvard. I was like, well, it's the work that you're requiring me to do. I'll do it well, but my real passion here is actually painting and drawing.
Awesome. I was thinking this morning, I was up early and making some notes about talking to you, and I was just flooded with my own memories. And one story I've never told people, a very early indicative of being a designer, I think, at least in my case, was when I was a kid, my mother would take me shopping with her, and we would go into dress stores, and I was short enough that I could walk underneath all the dresses, or, go into the middle of the carousel of clothes. And I was a collector and a curator, and I would pull the labels. They might have been red. They might have had some typography. There was something that I was attracted to. And so I would pull all these labels, and we would leave the store, and my mother made a purchase or she didn't, and we'd leave the store, and she'd notice that I'm clutching this handful of designer labels, and she would just look down and go, "Oh, Jimmy."
It's funny. I would like throughout my teens and 20s, I would grab pieces, like real fragments, like bits of ephemera that just struck me as compositionally so perfect in their sort of miniatureness that where it's just like, a fraction of a piece of a letter form and, deeply letterpressed onto a parking ticket that's on a blue, a blue, baby blue background, where it's just like, there's something so sort of perfect about this little thing. And I still have a case full of them, and they informed some of the work that I did as a book jacket designer, and they definitely informed our wedding invitations. But it's probably like a recurring theme of my sort of adult life, that there is so much, to borrow Elvis Costello's thing, so much useless beauty, so much of it. Like there's just like it's hard to walk through the world with the visual acuity that you have or that I have, and not just be overwhelmed by these moments of perfection that exist
Yeah.
in the spaces between the things that are supposed to be beautiful.
Yeah. My you have a one boy?
I have a boy and a girl. My
Okay.
boy just turned 16 and my daughter is 11.
Excellent. My son is 11 and my daughter is about to turn 9, and they are they're children, so they're wildly creative, but and they know me to be pedantic, meaning I'm always we walk around and I'm always pointing things out, and I'm saying, oh my, I take them for walks in the woods and I'm like, oh my God, look at this. And I just this morning, or no, just last night, we were watching they don't have iPads. They don't do anything on the computer except at school. But we do have movie night occasionally. And I'm often stopping the movie and pointing something out. It might be a social cultural moment. It might be a visual, or it might be oh my God, look at these titles, that kind of thing. It was funny because I stopped and I said, oh, Wyatt, stop the movie, stop. And I said, hey guys, by the way, I've realized I stop movies a lot for you, and I don't want to ruin the movie for you. And they were like, oh no, we like it when you do because we understand it better. And I was like, oh, fuck me.
I mean, it's hard. You do it so naturally, like it just sort of, you can't help yourself but do it. But then that sort of, I mean, this is the great thing about raising children, is that you are then helping them sort of understand how to make sense of the craziness that is life. Like it's a beautiful thing when they suddenly accept that your superpower is not just your weirdness. It's a way of sort of framing the world. It's great.
Earlier you were talking about the bits and bobs that we collect. Are there historically a handful of pieces that just hit you emotionally when you were starting out, like other people's work?
Yeah, I talk about this with my friend Jan, who I walk with regularly, usually run with, but I'm in sort of that in between phase, that trough while I wait for the surgery to take place and then heal from it. But we have known each other since we were at college, so a long time, decades. So the conversation is very shorthand. But when we first started hanging out together, it was a time in New York City and the tri-state area where there was no internet, and you could drive to a used and antiquarian bookstore and go through the shelves and find absolute gems. The Bacon work that you're talking about, but also for me, Dwiggins, Bradbury Thompson, all ran to a lesser degree, but Brad Thompson and Dwiggins, to me, had this sort of, there was something in their aesthetic and Dwiggins' craft that, and his ability to sort of move between sort of hard edge typography, florid lettering, and then really beautiful illustration, all sort of layered with a sort of hyper unique color sense. That stuff really informed a lot of how I sort of picked and poked around the edges of what design would be for me.
I was talking with some students recently, and I can't have those conversations with them.
Mhm.
I can't talk about even, Paul Rand because they don't know it. And when you and I were growing up, there was one book,
Yes.
right?
And you memorized it pretty much. I mean,
Yeah.
from
There was one book and it had to everybody. And it was the history of graphic design. And I forgot his name. I met him.
Megs.
Phil Meggs. I met him at the end of the life and actually got into his second edition, luckily. But we don't have that anymore. And I don't know if that loss of history is a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, they vacillate because it's a reality. Like everything is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. That what was for us, I think, as designers in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, is sort of the grab bag of history, was it was clear what the canon was because it was still so new as a thing, and Megs really codified it. That when you found something outside of that canon, it was like discovering something truly novel, like doesn't exist in Megs. But now everything is everywhere. And what I realized early on, back to the introduction of the Macintosh. The Macintosh saved me so much time from my sort of not stupid, I shouldn't say that, from my regular job of sort of doing rectilinear layout, that I was like, I can get all the work done by noon and then go spend the time in the library. So I read everything on typography in the Cooper Union Library in the afternoons when I was a designer there, because there was so much free time. And so I realized in doing that every book itself, including Meg's, but especially Meg's, but every book that you read on typography was a signpost to 5 other books on typography.
Mm-hmm.
So you would slowly sort of begin to map out the history from sources that would point to other sources. Um, uh, the web sort of made everything completely connected, like hyperlinked, but the sort of what's missing is the sort of signage system. Like, I mean, and I suppose that's us as instructors. It's us. It's it's the role of design criticism or design history to sort of offer those signs up to people. But it was a clear landscape then with clear indicators of where to go next to find out more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm going to read a quote by you from your Instagram. I just want you to clarify it for me.
Been there for a couple of years.
My own education. You said style is dead, long live style. Style for style's sake has left us numb. Charming templates, infinite scrolls of dopamine beauty, samey branding everywhere you look. When everything dazzles, nothing sticks. Talk to me about that.
So there is this, the sort of promise that everyone in this templated design economy can be a designer. But I think that what it does actually is turn everyone into an art director. Because design is the sort of understanding what the problem is, sort of like imagining all of the sort of experience and work that you've done in the past, all that you've seen, and then trying desperately to push something new into being, like to sort of reframe enough that you can actually find a new way of saying something visually. I think, especially at the sort of doorstep of agentic design systems, that we're going to see the level of average design raised to a degree that looks incredible by yesterday's standards. Yesterday's standards where it was really difficult to get those things.
Mm-hmm.
So that means like that when the floor raises and the ceiling stays the same place, that it just pushes out dramatically, and either it's sort of an endless horizon of sameness, all of a degree that looks professional, but that then calls into question what professional is.
Mm.
And so designers are the sand in that gear system. Like true designers are just going to sort of say like, well, if this is what good looks like, then we need to find another definition of good. We need for ourselves, and for, for culture, for whatever, just to keep things moving forward, because that is our sort of way of framing the world in order to make sense of our existence. It is that once everything becomes so good, you have to sort of keep climbing, keep flashing, keep sort of grinding things up and looking for something new. The experimentation, as much as it's inefficient, is the sort of the reason. It's the work itself, not the end product. So, I mean, I don't think I've made it clearer than what I wrote on Instagram, but I think that was my last post on Instagram before I just sort of said, like, I'm done with this. I can't, because I was seeing in Instagram precisely what I was seeing in the brandosphere.
Yeah. Yeah. What does bad typography reveal about a culture?
Bad typography reveals about a culture precisely what it reveals about an individual or a company or a brand, that that there is a lack of understanding of how all of the details add up to the quality. So, like, if an ad has really great display typography, but then the text typography is garbage, it sort of is an indicator that somebody cares about the big things, but is not paying attention to the details. So it's a very frank way of interpreting it.
Yeah.
But I think writ large, like, if a culture doesn't care about typography, then they're not keeping their eye on the totality of the presentation. And nobody sees everything. Like, you and I both described looking at landscapes and picking out things like, the flit of a goldfinch is something that's in hyper contrast to the totality of nature. We can't see everything. But we notice when things are off, and we can't, even if we can't put our fingers on it. And I think that's what bad typography reveals, is that somebody's not paying attention to the details.
Right now, you're thinking, oh man, I wish James Victori could be my mentor, my guru. Hell, I wish he was my coach. Well, you can make that happen. Go to yourworkisagift.com. There's a questionnaire that will probably help you out, but it'll also give you access to a free call. So let's talk. Let's free you from overwhelm and creative frustration. Let's build your business and help you get paid to do what you love. Again, go to yourworkisagift.com. Let's talk. Yeah. You have said before about typography, there were three facets of it. It's the making of the type, the usage of the type, and the reading. What does typography communicate before language even begins?
Oh, I've been thinking about this a lot. I just read this book called 32 Words for a Field, which is about the Irish language. I just finished it. It took me too long to finish it. But I finished it in a spate at the end, where I just sort of like plowed through the last part of it. And I was like, why did I wait so long to read this book? Because it sort of talks about the sort of, it talks about the Irish language and sort of peculiarities and specificity of the Irish language, but also about the desire of a language to capture the sound quality, and that there are within the idea of incantations these sort of sounds that have meaning beyond their meaning, that just the sort of like almost pre-language language, that the way that it strikes your ear, even if it doesn't mean the thing to you that it means to me, will carry the meaning. I think typography is that sort of, there is a visual language of typography that in its sort of most charismatic moments, like in display typography, the largest type, actually reads before the language itself. That we see it and it says something. I mean, this is a great example of typography reading before the language. Like I know what it means before I actually read it. I'm sorry, we're on a podcast and I just showed
Please, audience, please note that Charles Nix has held up a piece of James Victori's handwriting.
pegged to my wall here. Yeah, it's that. I think that that book made me immediately want to go and make things typographically that were as purely visual as they could possibly be. Almost, and initially I thought, oh, and this was only 2 days. Initially I thought in a traditional typographic or designer's sort of contrarian way of like, what if the words were different than what the visual form was? What if it was precisely meant to be the opposite thing? And how precise could I get in making something that was the opposite in its meaning to its form? But to me, it's the richest territory. It's like there's a variability of the language itself. Like we never know precisely as designers which language is going to be given to us. Thus, we choose it ourselves. But then when you cloak it in something, when you clothe it in typography, it becomes something completely different. It can become more serious, can become more sort of scary, can become less serious. That part I really love, and I don't have a complete atlas for it, which is sort of my life's desire would be to have somebody tell me this does this to this language. But it's so variable that the sort of experimentation of design really keeps it vital, keeps me at it, keeps all of us at it.
You're making me think of a particular point in my career back in the Paul Bacon days. So I was like early 20s. There were these fantastic type selection books from the different type houses, tall 2-inch thick spines, tall vertical books, and they were specimen books, and they would go from serif all the way through to sans serif, and it was just like every line would be slightly different, a different face. And I remember that phase of mine, and I started as a book jacket designer as well. I remember that phase of looking for the right font, and I would spend hours going through it. Is it this? Is it Torino? Or is it Bodoni? Or is it right? But I got to a point, and I was like, wait a minute. I feel that this is useless. Because now what I'm doing is I'm allowing the font to depict. Like, I went to the Monotype site today, and there was some typeface that was like, it basically said, this typeface says fun. And I'm like, no, don't allow that. Right. You fucking make it fun by how you use it. It's like I think a good designer can use Helvetica and make it say a number of different things.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I agree. I want there to be a concordance that sort of says this typeface is fun. But I think one of my students, when I was really young as a teacher, brought in 8x8 composition. It said happiness in Helvetica, and to me at the time, I was like, "What's happy about it?" And she's like, "Look at it." I was like, well, I think when you put it that way, it actually is true. It says happiness. It says it in the most blank way possible. And that sort of intersection of that word and that typeface was the sort of discovery, she unlocked it.
Mm-hmm. You are, I think, also like me, also at heart, a teacher. And you teach at a couple different places right now?
Right now, I teach. I have not taught for a year. Last year, I did a stint at SVA in a branding with type course with a whole star-studded cast. Amazing people put together by Joe Newton and Matteo Bologna, and that has been my only teaching beyond sort of like trying to wrangle the 1,000 people of Monotype to understand more the value of what it is that we sell. I left teaching about the time my my second child was born, because it was just, as much as I loved it, I loved spending time with them so much more. And so, yeah, I haven't been back. And I had also this sort of feeling that that teaching is, despite all sort of reports to the contrary, that teaching is a young person's game, because it because of the role of metaphor and simile in teaching, that the references have to be, there's a sort of sweet spot where there's shared references that, whether it's pop culture or the depth of their education, where those things sort of like overlap with one another, that makes it particularly potent. And then as I was getting older, I was my frame of reference, the sort of things that I would toss off as sort of, we all know about these things, right? Were becoming less and less things that we all knew about, and more things that I knew about.
Yeah. Yeah. I particularly remember that period when I left teaching at SVA, because I was there for, I don't know, almost 18 years. And I remember like being like a comedian on stage, right? Anyone? What do you mean you don't get my Simpsons reference? Like my Stanley Kubrick joke.
I mean, I think what happened after that was that it forced me to become more sort of direct about the formal aspects of my critique. So I would say less, this is like this, or this is like this, and more, could you stare at this and see what I'm seeing here? Like that these two letters are too close together, or that if you reduced these 5 elements to 3, you probably stand a better chance of success of organizing this space. Like really getting into much more sort of brass tacks formalist critique, and then let it expand back out from there into something like, let them tell me what the simile or metaphor is.
Do you think that level of taste is teachable?
No. But it's like teaching itself. Like, I don't know how much of what's in your head or my head is transferable to another person directly. But the inspiration for them to try and create something of their own is, I mean, that to me was the juice. Like, by the time I taught for 10 years, I'd seen so many of these same solutions to problems that you need to end up changing the problems themselves, and people still wander into the same solution parlor that they were in before. And it's not that they're going to create something completely new. It's that they're going to try to create something completely new. And if you could get them to do that, to try and sort of change the way that they see things, or to look closer at things, then you win, because they will become a better version of what they were when they sort of arrived. I always said this thing, like, you get 15 students on average in most college design courses, and one of them would fail, and it's just like nothing you could do about it. Like somebody just sort of, and why they were there to begin with is the mystery. But they would inevitably just sort of either fail out by not showing up to class, or just by just not doing the work. And then one would be so good that you would just be like, what are you doing here? Like, what? Why am I your teacher? Like, just keep doing you. And then everyone in the middle was who I was teaching to. Like, really trying to get the C's to be B's and the B's to be A's. Like, get them to see the choices that they were making as conscious choices, and to continue sort of pushing it further. So yeah, I do miss it. Obviously, I miss it. You can tell by the way I'm talking about it. I miss it.
I freaking love teaching. And I love teaching, meaning I love turning people on to themselves and their powers. That's a fantastic, such a fucking great job. What is it like stewarding? Let's talk about Monotype for a little bit. What is it like stewarding typography inside of, dare I say, a giant global corporation?
It is a giant global corporation. And, stewarding anything at that scale is just sort of, I mean, it's almost a pipe dream. There are teams of people inside of Monotype that have lots of different roles, like big chunks of people doing things like, foundry management, which is like, how many typefaces do you have in the library? Where did they come from? What are you looking at acquiring next? What's missing in terms of tone of voice in type? And managing the relationships with all the independent foundries that make up the sort of totality of that nearly 500,000 fonts. Then there's the group of people who are involved in engineering and designing and project managing around fonts. And those, custom or modified fonts, like special expressions of typography for brands or for companies. Then there's an entire group that I'm a part of, which is about the relationships with creative teams and design teams at the largest companies on the planet.
Yeah.
And at that scale, it's a level of abstraction around typography that takes a while to sort of get your head around, which is that it is not the typography that is the project. It's not the typeface that's the project. The company itself is the project. Their relation to typography, their relation to creativity, their relation to the way that type flows from that designer to that audience through all of the crazy multiplicitous machinations of these magnificently large global companies, like helping them sort of unpack that for themselves, like trying to understand it yourself, but also treating them in that sort of way of that you would treat a design problem, which is to say, like, what is the problem? Is the problem as stated the actual problem? How do we reframe it? What are the components of this problem? Like, and really like trying to improve the overall sort of typographic ethos of a company or ecosystem of a company by treating the company itself as a design problem. Mm-hmm. So it's great because I get to go talk to really interesting people at really cool companies all over the planet. But like I said, it's a level of abstraction from what I entered the profession doing.
Yeah. Here's an oddball question. And this has been coming up a lot in my life dealing with designers right now, especially because of the, AI coming into view. When I was at SVA, there was always a conversation with a student or a group of students. They would say, my parents don't know what I do for a living. And of course, I would say, okay, but have you sat down and have you educated them? Have you told them what it means to you? Have you given them examples of the work and the power that we have? And do corporations understand like that, or is that your job to kind of
that is my job?
Understand?
I mean, every corporation is those children's parents.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And I mean, these are families that are 50,000 strong in some cases. So like as I'm quick to point out to anyone who gets involved in this sort of level of work, there's connections, like you must make multiple levels of connection to any of these sort of large organizations. You have to set up a regular cadence with them. So it's not like you meet them once a year. You're trying to meet them as regularly as possible and on as many levels as possible. And then there's this sort of rapport factor or trust factor that is the hardest of all things, which is that conversation with the parents to sort of say, like, all right, I'm going to try and explain this to you in a way that that resonates with what you do, because I realize your concerns and my concerns are not parallel. But what I do can help you pretty dramatically. What I do is actually a big part of your life, whether you recognize it or not. And I'm going to walk you through how deeply ingrained what it is I do as a typographer and what we do as a typographic company is in the work that you do as a consumer products group. Mm-hmm. Like that, to me, that sort of, I find that sort of almost sparkly or effervescent, sort of this idea of like a level of abstraction that's almost inconceivable, but you have to conceive of it. That's your job. Mm-hmm. So I think that yeah, a lot of it is sort of explaining to various sort of facets of these large organizations what it is that is valuable about typography. And it's easy to fall back on the sort of optimization of processes and like the sort of functional aspects of typography. It does this with your message, it carries it this way. It's harder to sort of get to that sort of charismatic level of typography and say, this is one of the key details in the way that people either trust or don't trust what it is that you're saying. And they see when it falls apart, but you might not be able to if you're not sort of paying attention to the details that are crucial to its success. Yeah. So
Yeah.
long one.
I think whether you're talking typography or color or a number of different aspects of our work, there are so many subliminals. There are so many subliminal messages that that people have to read into these things. I rely heavily. My work has become so Spartan that I need everything that's on the page needs to carry its fucking weight, right? Does commerce at that level, does commerce make typography, I don't know, safer?
Depending on the vertical, like, I was looking at these cake mix packages over the weekend, and the typography is bizarre. It's like, I find it so sort of like in the sort of true Andy Warhol, what's going on this Campbell's soup can like level of wonder. Like, who made that decision? Like, I'm glad you did. It's really weird, and I would never have chosen that. But like to sort of look at it and sort of take it apart and sort of say like, okay, what happens when you change this? It's right in front of me right now, actually. It's super exciting on that sort of bizarre shaping culture through commerce level. There are places though, like in finance, where you have to fall back on the idea that functional typography can be its own sort of microcosm of interest, and that, doing something really truly pedantic well in that circumstance is the name of the job. That is the name of success. So there's far less sort of charismatic interest in that kind of thing, and more just sort of like the functional aspect of typography executed well is its own sort of transcendent craft and expression.
Do you feel like you have to defend? Speaking of craft, do you feel like you have to defend craft in a kind of our speed-driven culture?
I am in the midst of sort of thinking through what happens to craft in the next sort of iteration of technology, because it's already, forget that how much craft. Well, you and I don't forget, because we knew people who actually did photo retouching. They had an office and they retouched photos in that office. And people who would
negative form.
Yeah, and people who would set type. So there were typesetters that many typesetters in New York, and they were people who worked either in an office or individually, and they would set your type for them, and you would get your type from them. The compression of that craft into what we came to practice in the 90s as desktop publishing was dramatic. We lost a lot of sort of institutional knowledge or craft knowledge around these sort of component parts, because they were specialists. Imagine that minus the desktop publishing, like the compression of craft, when even the sort of ideation and prompting becomes agentified. One will really have to struggle to sort of promote the idea of craft. And initially it's going to be, the craft of cleaning up slop, which is,
the craft of a mop.
the worst. Editing a piece is much harder than writing a piece.
Oh, Lord. Yeah.
So you have to defend craft a lot. Yeah. It's some people see it, some people don't.
Yeah. Here's an odd question. What does courage look like in the typographic sphere?
Courage is, it's the ability to sort of not do what has been done before. I mean, and again, I even said this morning, I was talking about this as sort of bifurcated. Typography is charismatic typography, the stuff we can all see and we pay attention to the details of, because it's large enough to be in our face and allow us to see the way that, the type is behaving. And then there's the typography that's functional, the sort of text and micro typography. Courage is sort of knowing what is right and choosing to do what is different because that's what moves culture forward.
Mhm.
That more of the same will not sort of be an expression of who you are or where we need to go to collectively. Like, it will just be more of the same. So I think it is the sort of first the desire, and second the ability to sort of push into some new territory. And it's mostly, well, I mean, desire without talent is not a good thing. But that desire is the courage. I think that is each of us as designers or as artists sort of saying, I believe that there are new ways of framing reality out there, and that they make life worth living.
Mhm.
And that's the courage of typography as a sort of subset of the courage of design, as a subset of the courage of the artistic endeavor.
Mhm. Awesome. Are there things that are your thoughts or views on creativity, have they changed since you were 25?
Yeah, pretty dramatically. I think I was very much about in my teen years, my early teen years, when even like 10 to 20, maybe sort of overly enthusiastic about the formal aspect of things, like things that looked cool. And the culture was crazy alive at that time in terms of, I mean, music culture, especially late 70s, early 80s. And so seeing things and not understanding how they came to be was not a concern to me. Like, I just wanted the things themselves. And I think once I started doing it for myself, I realized that so much of the form was an outgrowth of the process.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I think later it sort of matured into that idea of the of your last question, more about courage. Like, do you have the desire to go further than you did before?
Mm-hmm.
Now that you know how to theorize and reframe, can you go some other place with it? Can you do something that scares yourself?
That's a good place to be. Um, this podcast I called "The Right Questions" because I feel like the right questions lead to deeper truths, right? Um, so, what do you think the right question designers should be asking themselves right now is?
I'm sort of I'm right now I am so last night I woke up at 1 a.m. in the morning. I had the most awful dream. Um and it's because I ate too much salty food during the day and went to bed reading reading this book by Ernest Becker called The Denial of Death. And so a lot of my thoughts lately have been around, like, what the sort of horns of the day, what it is to be born, what it is to die. Um and whether what we're doing has enough meaning, not for the world, but for us to sort of to carry on with what we do. And so I think the question that we have to ask ourselves as designers is whether there is enough art in what we do in order to call it creativity. Like we have a requisite level of craft. We sort of go through the sort of motions that help us arrive at the end product, and we sort of ritualize those in a way that sort of allows us to have a job and believe that one day is bound to the next. But it is that it is our duty, I think, to ourselves, which will manifest itself in the work that we do for others, to ask whether we are being creative.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Charles, I wish more people could hear you. I wish that your softness and your senses and your spirit and your love of craft and art and design and type could reach more people. I appreciate this delightful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And I'm so pleased to have reconnected with you after so long. As I boyishly sort of admitted, even at my advanced age, in a sort of blushy way, when we last met each other, I was so in awe of your creativity and verve that I felt a sort of a sense of not unworthiness, but sort of like I was afraid of you. But to meet you now, and to talk to you, I realize what a genuine creative, I don't know, signpost, lightpost, lighthouse, like beacon you are. You embody through the work that you do and through the person you are. I think the best ideal of what it means to be a courageous creative.
Oh, well, now you're just making me blush.
Well, that was not intended just to do that, but
and I agree with you completely.
Good, very good.
Charles, thank you so much for this conversation. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, James.
Okay, we'll cut it there, dude. You are so kind and so generous and so sweet. I could wax philosophical a week. I could go back and talk about the early New York days forever with you. And I'm not one of those guys. I'm not like a glory day guy. But
you don't suffer from nostalgia, no.
But I really that period was very important to me, and even. One of the questions I wanted to ask was about what would you suggest for someone who likes, I rarely add on another font unless there's something particular, very, very particular that I need. But, I like limitations. I like restrictions in my work. I create restrictions in my work. I still make stickers with Cooper Black. One, because it exists. Two, because individually they are beautiful. And three, because designers generally hate it.
Hi, designers. Yeah, I am on both sides of that fence. I mean, through my daily work, I'm sort of forced into this sort of quasi international style of design, like grids, rectilinear, single typeface. But in the work that feels most natural to me as a practicing typographer, I consider all of it paint. It's all paint. I can feel it, I can smell it, I can taste it, I can see it, and I can arrange it on a page in a way that makes me feel like I'm composing music,
yeah,
or painting.
Excellent.
And it makes me feel extra happy because my mentors hated that. They absolutely loathed it. They could not imagine why anyone would do that. But to me, I mean, the world is so big and so deep and dense that why would you limit yourself?
Yeah. Excellent. I think we had a false ending there. So, so Charles Nix, thank you again. And I will let you go on that. Okay.
All right, man.
I'll let you know when this is coming out. Thanks for your help. I appreciate it.
No problem. Take care, man. Bye-bye.